Hello everyone, welcome to those who haven't been here before, welcome back to those who have watched before. Thanks for coming again. My name is Aaliyah Langley and we are here for your official WWDC 2026 recap. Apple's keynote just wrapped up like no more than 15 minutes ago, and I'm jumping right in to give you the recap of today's event. They're kicking off their Worldwide Developers Conference where they have all these developers come in, and but this keynote is always kind of like the start of the time to kind of give people software updates, things to look forward to in September when they have their biggest kind of event of the year of new products and things like that, but kind of starting to set the groundwork software-wise for what we're going to see. So we knew coming into this event that this was going to be really targeted and around Apple Intelligence and Siri with the kind of title that they had, glowing and these kind of things. They had something like this a couple years ago, but Apple Intelligence never really hit like the marks people hoped it would have hit. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Let me not even jump too far ahead, but lots of that today as expected. So Tim Cook came out and gave the intro. Some people were unsure if it was going to be Tim Cook or the new incoming CEO, John Ternus, who's currently the Senior Vice President of Hardware Engineering. He's starting in September. I was someone who was like, is Tim maybe going to have John be the intro person instead? Or like, will Tim still be on? Because this is essentially his last keynote. But Tim was there. He was the intro, nice quick intro. He also did at the very end have like a little personal note, said like, it's been an honor of a lifetime to work with the team. Basically, he never said directly that this is his last keynote, but we know it is because we know there's no more events, like big events like this until September when John Ternus is going to be the CEO. So that was a little note, and then really went right into, it was essentially Craig Federici, who was the person who was the Senior Vice President of Software Engineering, who led us through this whole thing. As makes sense because again, WWDC, huge on software, and let's really jump into that. He did let us know that the new Mac OS is going to be called Golden Gate in a nice little cute, funny way that they often do. Mac OS Golden Gate, we'll be seeing that. But kind of the big things that they said from the start that they wanted to go over were platform improvements, trust and safety, and Apple Intelligence. And they really hit just that. They went, one by one. So starting out with platform improvements, the first kind of thing they talked about there was like design. They kind of did a quick little like recap of what liquid glass is and like how that's been good. And they have some updates to that to like improve readability and giving people options to set how clear it is. There's like a little scroll option where you can have it be more liquid glassy or maybe more like transparent and kind of like be able to customize it in that way. I kind of have forgotten about liquid glass being a thing. It doesn't really bother me. Or my liquid glass, I feel like the way it's set, the default works. I haven't changed it and it just is good and it's fine. The fundamentals, improve responsiveness. iPhone, iPad apps are going to launch 30% faster. New photos appear 70% faster. AirDrop up to 80% faster. Transferring files from iPad 5% faster. So great things there. iOS 27 is going to be available on all phones all the way back to iPhone 11, excuse me, which is going to be, it's going to be available to the most users ever, which is great. Upgrades to search and spotlight, shared photo albums. Now you're able to have Android and Windows users being on your shared albums, which is great. AirPods with custom EQ. I think some people were excited about hearing that, be able to customize it for yourself even further. And other updates with like cycle tracking, some Vision Pro updates, flyover Apple TV, etc. Some nice good platform enhancements. Trust and safety is up next. Now we know Apple, their whole big thing is privacy and safety and all these things in the little like Apple lock logo. But this one, they talked a lot about children and like how parents can be involved with children in terms of, they went over like three big things: what kids can see, who kids can talk to, and like what access do kids have. And they really went over all these things. I don't have kids, but some people could look at it in a sense and be like, Apple cares about this, but they also could say like, you have to have an iPhone to make sure your child is monitored in a good way. Obviously, like they are a company at the end of the day, so they were talking about they're working off like the American Academy of Pediatrics and working on their standards set for device usage and things like that to try to, make things work. I mean, Apple's in an interesting position. They're not like a Google or Instagram. They want you to be on their app to, to use it a lot. It's like, as long as you have the phone, we're good. Like you have the phone, you already have bought in. So they went over a lot of things. A lot of things I actually thought were quite good and like I think very, very well intentioned. And if I had children, I'd be interested in setting up these things for them. So like first thing is like a child account. And you can, even if you have a child now who has an app, like a phone account, things like that, they can be converted to child accounts where you can set like their age and those kind of things, and giving tips for developers to how to like work with them to make sure apps can be able to, make sure things are locked down. So like what kids can see, like ask to browse. You can directly ask your parent, oh, I just want to open up this website. It's not on my like approved thing. Can I browse this? Can I download or buy this app? Those kind of things. Who kids can talk to. You could set their phone to say they can only speak to me and my husband, or like their grandparents, or this friend or that friend. All these like approvals to go through, which is really great. What access do kids have in terms of like changing screen time to time allowances? I think there's already kind of a way you can do that on your own like device, like setting yourself time allowances to say, oh, I want to use like this app for like an hour or so a day. Obviously, you can easily bypass that if you want, especially for adults. I think for children, it'll be different because the parents are kind of the ones who are controlling that, and it'll, again, work within the guidelines that like the American Academy of Pediatrics sets. So you can change things for different days, with the screen time schedule, all things like in there. And they announced the new website as well that will help parents learn more about this. So I think a lot of it is well-intentioned, but again, I do think some people could look at that and say, Apple is basically telling parents, you have to get an iPhone or you have to be with us because we're the ones who are going to make it work. Obviously, they didn't say that, but again, as I said, they are a company at the end of the day. Other phones and carriers and things like that can do this, of course, but Apple, I think their presentation on it was very nice. And again, if I had children, I'd be like, this is something I'd be very interested in to like get into, because kids and devices and all these kind of things, it's happening, it's here. How are we going to like attack it, really? And then the biggest part of the presentation, again, really the whole reason everyone was there, intelligence. And yeah, so Craig Federighi was talking about intelligence and how like, some companies are doing AI and kind of maybe rush. He didn't say rushing, but he said like, truly helpful, this is a quote, truly helpful AI must be centered around you and your needs. And again, Apple's big on privacy. And he said, quote, here, designing it with privacy at every step is a big part of what, they need. And we have a new generation of Apple intelligence upon us. So kind of like three main things we spoke about here, but the first one was new architecture. I forgot that this happened, but I was reminded in this keynote. Apple Foundation models paired with Google Gemini Foundation models, Google Gemini models, created the next generation of Apple Foundation models. So it was announced in a press release months ago now, if not longer, that Google and Google Gemini and Apple are going to be working together. And clearly, Apple needed help to figure out how are we going to get our AI to a place where we can be competitive in the market, frankly, but also just like useful, because Siri has had little improvements in the Apple Intelligence has been kind of out, but like it's not really something that people are like using to a big level or really talking about comparatively if you think about Gemini or ChatGPT or some of these other ones. And obviously Google and Apple already have a relationship with like Google being the default browser on your like Safari and for things like that. But again, I think a big piece of Apple that maybe held them back potentially is they are big on privacy and they're big on wanting to make sure your data is being used correctly, which I think is excellent because we need that. So like they were saying, they have some things together that can be on device and also in servers. And another quote from Craig: privacy in AI is non-negotiable. So again, really putting an emphasis on privacy all throughout there. And then he passed it off to some other people to talk about it. So the first thing here is all new Siri with Apple Intelligence. Rebuilt Siri with a powerful AI at the core. I feel like this naming is really basic and interesting. Siri plus Apple Intelligence equals Siri AI. Oh, wow. So 5 new things with Siri. First up being a more capable assistant. They gave some examples of kind of like them being able to really assist you. New voice. The voice that they previewed sounded weird to me, but they did say you can adjust it like with different pace and expressivity in the settings, which was nice because I heard the voice and I was just like, yuck. More conversational was the second piece. Example about like a World Cup game, like trying to figure out what the schedule is for the World Cup, saying, oh, this Brazil-Morocco game looks like a good thing. Let's have a watch party or like a get together with some friends. And then saying, oh, my daughter was talking to me about some dessert she wanted to make. Can we pull that into the menu, making a whole menu, saying it to the group, kind of like conversational, and integrating Siri into Spotlight as well. Like if you're typing on your computer and it's clearly maybe a Siri question, but you type it into Spotlight, it will kind of automatically change it to Siri as needed. So all those kind of good things there. I mean, so far you can see the Gemini infusion. Obviously, it's working with Apple to they kept talking about like on device, some of these things on device, but obviously working within your life and in your bringing in outside sources like the World Cup schedule with personal context from like my daughter to make these cookies and like putting them together. But a lot of these things, like, it's like, oh, you can tell Gemini is infused in there in terms of these things were a lot about like what Gemini kind of does already in some of these bits. With that, there's a dedicated Siri app. It's across devices. And it keeps like conversations, again, similar to Gemini, where you can see like your conversation history, maybe dive back into something, that whole kind of thing. Visual intelligence is coming across all devices now, which is great. Siri mode and camera is one thing that looked interesting. You could point it at food and like say like, what is this recipe? Like, what is this food? Pointed, something I saw right away because I go to dinners with my friends a lot, things like that. Point the camera at a bill and it can automatically kind of like open up Apple Cash and split the bill based on what people got. Things like that, like, some good little visual intelligence bits. Write with Siri, start a draft for you on something you want to send, and it will know, like, it can send it in your typical language and tone and format based on like previous messages of yours. Like if you usually send your boss something in bullet points, it can like replicate that, or different kind of situations like that. Automatic proofreading even across third-party apps. So lots of updates to Siri, and Siri is desperately needed in terms of like the virtual assistant space. Siri has been far behind for quite some time. So this infusion with AI, we'll see how it goes. I think some of the things they were saying sounds nice, and I do think Apple's in a great situation in this sense, because I now and then will use Gemini, not very much, because and things like this, I will now and then use it, like really now and then, like not that often, because I have some of my own issues with AI at a whole. But I do think with Apple, they're in a situation where I'm a very much an Apple person, and maybe one of the reasons I haven't used AI as much outside of my whole kind of like maybe issues and thoughts with it as a whole is because it's not something that really will work across like everything well. I'm not a Google person. I use Google for my work, but I don't, outside of that, I'm Apple everything else. So it's not something that really can like kind of like work on everything that I'm working on in a good way. So Apple, I think, being the manufacturer of all your devices and even some of the apps that it has, being able to work together with it, will be interesting to see how they're able to pull it off. And again, I've wanted Siri to be better for a long time, particularly because I have devices that use Siri, even like things in my home. I'm looking at a HomePod I have right here. Like I don't ask it things very much other than like basic things like turning on the lights, because I know it's not very capable, or play this song, play that song, even on my phone and stuff like that. So being able to have more use for it outside of like being able just to quickly hold it down instead of like having to go into an app like you have right now with like Gemini or ChatGPT, will be interesting to see how they pull it off. And again, we know it basically is Google Gemini just in an Apple box, and maybe that's more like private, more different ways to make it work better. I don't know. We're going to see, but there were some exciting things that at least that they were previewing. Right now, Siri AI is going to be available in English, and it's going to start to expand eventually. Next piece is Apple Intelligence in apps. So they gave some examples of like Safari at first. They were talking about like tabs. Right now we have tab groups, which I kind of forget about. I have tab groups. I have some saved that are like good. I don't really need to get rid of them. Like some things from like, just like things I have saved. But I'm like, oh yeah, there are tab groups. Like I usually don't even dig into those. But now they have things where if you have tabs open right now, like they can organize them into topics. Which is nice, because sometimes you're saying you're opening up many things. Let's say I was doing something for this video and I had a bunch of Apple stuff open. It would kind of like organize it all into a bunch of Apple WWDC stuff or whatever. And you can either, at the end of the day, close that whole tab, like organization area, or save it into a tab group for later. All these kind of things, which I think is nice because to kind of help declutter your life a little bit. Notify me in Safari. It looks like you're constantly checking on a page to check when the registration is opening. It can notify you without you having to continually like go in there to refresh. Also describe an extension. Some other like little updates with Safari. Messages, one-tap suggestions based on the context of what you're saying, like set a reminder, set a note easily. Same with mail, calendar, describe an event you want to create in natural language or an event you want to edit in natural language. Phone, you could pull up relevant things. Like say you're calling an airline, and instead of you having to dig for your flight number, you can just put it right there on the picture, on the page view, which is nice. Home, some updates to cameras, like recorded clips, descriptions, etc. Shortcuts, describe a shortcut. You think that'd be basically how it should be now, but like you can just easily describe something. Image playground updates, easier to edit and describe, etc. Photos, cleanup, extend, and reframe, which is newer things, spatial reframing. Let's say you have a picture. They give an example of this guy showing his kids on their like last day of school and saying, "Oh, I wish I was standing here because maybe the angle would be better. I could like take the photo and basically move the subject around, and it could like reframe the photo." Look interesting and cool. Nice little things you could play around with. Yeah, those are really the big updates to Siri and Apple Intelligence as a whole. Again, kind of like infusing it across devices. The update for Apple Intelligence will be available for all product models that currently have Apple Intelligence, but some of the things, like they said, the most powerful on-device model features like expressive voices and more advanced dictation will come to their most capable iPhone, iPad, and Mac systems. Now I'm curious like what that exactly means, like the most powerful on-device model features, and like what exactly those features are. I have the phone that would be the most updated. I think in my Mac, my laptop here is updated. My iPad's older than what it works for. Both my iPads are older than what it works for. Or my iPad mini I don't think has anything. I forget the chip it has in there, but it's like a phone chip or something like that. So it'll be interesting to see like how it works on different devices, or like what the specifics are around what is not actually going to transfer to like my older iPad that has Apple Intelligence, but it's M1 iPad that it's working great for me. I'm not going to get rid of it, so I don't need to get a new one. But like, what is the difference going to be? Like I experienced on that device versus like my Mac or something like that. Yeah, these kind of things. They also talked about, Craig mentioned like some delays in the EU and China as they get through some like regulatory things and whatnot. I wonder what all that's about. Like some of that stuff. Obviously, they're not going to go into all that on the stream, but yeah, what kind of regulations do they have over there that we don't have over here? Like I wanna know what the regulations are. Yeah, so the developer beta, as typical, starts today. Public beta is in July and available to all in September, in the fall they said, but September, it'll be September. Like I said, it ended with a personal note from Tim, again, like thankful for everything, kind of like, you can tell he was saying like goodbye without saying goodbye. It was a nice little thing. And then really to kick it off, or end it off, was in a music video called Appreciation, starring Eric the Architect, and he's just like rapping. It's a music video of him rapping about all these apps, and all the animations are coming on screen of like all these apps coming up as he's like walking through this space. For a minute I thought it was like he was like in back rooms, because he started in like a yellowish room, and I was like, is this like a back rooms thing? I was like, are they somehow involved? But it wasn't. And it literally, the last line of the like rap was, "Thank you for developing these apps for me and all my friends." And again, this is what the whole WWDC is about. It's giving the public a preview for what Apple's been cooking up, but they, outside of, they have, I don't know how many like individual apps Apple makes themselves, but most of the apps people use, or a lot of apps people use across Apple devices, are third-party apps. So they have to work directly with developers to make these new software features work on these new apps that people are going to be using all the time. So this is their big conference to get people to do just that. The big name people, like the ones you can think of, the really popular apps, to even the smaller apps that are maybe more niche or have smaller teams, things like that, everyone has to come together to work with these kind of manufacturers and these kind of things to make the vision possible for us, the consumer. So great WWDC today. Really happy to always watch WWDC and all the Apple events. As you know, I'm an Apple girly through and through, have been forever. Really forever. Shout out to my parents for helping that be possible, I guess, since I was a young child. So, yeah. And as I always like to say, Apple, if you're ever watching this, feel free to find me and invite me to one of these conferences. I would really appreciate being there at one of these. Obviously, I'm not an app developer, but like being in the keynote would be awesome. Going to Apple Park and seeing the whole thing would be fun. So September, I can make myself available. If you want to invite me to that one, let me know. I know I'm like small on the creator space here, but big fan. So yeah, that is their WWDC recap 2026. Feel free to Hop in the comments if you have questions for me. I'll answer them the best I can. I also will link the whole conference if you want to watch the like hour-and-a-half conference. Feel free, but hopefully I gave you a good kind of like recap of everything and not too long of a time so you can get on with your day. And thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.